Today, China is one of the most powerful countries on Earth. It has the world's second largest economy, the world's largest manufacturing industry, one of the most powerful militaries, the world's biggest high-speed rail network, and hundreds of cities that look like they came from the future. But just a few decades ago, China was one of the poorest countries in the world. Millions of people struggled to find enough food. Most roads were unpaved. Factories were almost non-existent. Foreign companies refused to invest. Many experts believed China would never become a developed nation. So, how did China transform itself from a poor agricultural country into a global superpower? Was it luck? Was it one leader? Or was it one of the greatest economic revolutions in human history? This is the complete story of how China became a superpower, a nation in ruins. To understand China's rise, we first need to travel back nearly 80 years. The year was 1949. China had just emerged from decades of war. First came the Japanese invasion, then a long and bloody civil war. Millions had died. Entire cities had been destroyed. The country's economy had almost collapsed. Factories had stopped working. Railways were damaged. Agriculture had been devastated. People were exhausted. Most Chinese families survived on farming. Modern industries barely existed. The average person earned very little. Electricity was rare outside major cities. Healthcare was almost impossible to access. Education was limited. Life expectancy was only around 40 years. China was not seen as a future superpower. In fact, many believed China would remain poor forever. New government. In October 1949, Mao Zedong stood in Beijing and announced the birth of a new country, the People's Republic of China. For millions of Chinese people, this represented hope. Hope for peace. Hope for stability. Hope for a better future. The Communist Party promised equality. Large landowners lost their property. Land was redistributed to poor farmers. Banks, factories, railways, major industries, all came under government control. The government believed that only a centrally planned economy could rebuild China. At first, many people supported these reforms. Production increased. Basic education expanded. Healthcare slowly improved. But rebuilding an entire nation was never going to be easy. China still faced enormous challenges. Food shortages, lack of technology, very little industrial experience, almost no foreign investment. The country remained isolated from much of the world. And soon, the government would launch one of the most ambitious economic experiments in history. An experiment that would completely change China's future. But not in the way anyone expected. By the late 1950s, Mao Zedong believed China could become an industrial superpower in just a few years. He wanted China to catch up with Britain, and eventually surpass the United States. It was an incredibly ambitious dream. But dreams alone cannot build an economy. In 1958, Mao launched a massive campaign, known as the Great Leap Forward. According to the government, China would rapidly increase steel production, modernize agriculture, and transform itself into an industrial nation almost overnight. Millions of people were organized into giant farming communes. Private farms disappeared. Families could no longer decide what to grow or how to work. Everything was controlled by the state. Officials promised extraordinary harvests, but many of those numbers were simply not true. Local leaders often exaggerated production because they feared punishment if they reported poor results. As false reports reached Beijing, the government believed there was more food than actually existed. Large amounts of grain were collected by the state, leaving very little for ordinary people. Soon, villages began to run out of food. Entire communities faced hunger. But the government continued to believe that production was increasing. Backyard steel campaign. At the same time, another strange experiment was taking place. Mao believed every village could help industrialize China. People were ordered to build small steel furnaces in their own neighborhoods. Families melted cooking pots, farm tools, and metal household items. The hope was simple: produce more steel, and China would become an industrial giant. But reality was very different. Most of this metal was poor quality. It could not be used in factories. Meanwhile, millions of farmers had left the fields to produce useless steel. Agricultural production dropped even further. The food crisis became worse. The Great Famine. Between 1959 and 1961, China experienced one of the worst famines in modern history. Harvests failed. Food supplies disappeared. Millions of people suffered from starvation. Even today, historians continue to debate the exact number of deaths. But many estimates suggest that tens of millions of people lost their lives during this period. It became one of the greatest human tragedies of the 20th century. Villages were abandoned. Factories stopped operating. Economic growth collapsed. China's dream of becoming a superpower seemed further away than ever before. For many countries watching from abroad, this confirmed their belief. China, they thought, would never become a major global power. Lessons from failure. The Great Leap Forward was a disaster. But history often teaches its greatest lessons through failure. Inside the Communist Party, many leaders quietly began asking difficult questions. Could strict central planning really create prosperity? Was there another path that China should follow? These questions would eventually lead to one man, whose decisions would completely transform China's future. His name was Deng Xiaoping. Unlike Mao, Deng believed something very different. He believed it did not matter whether an idea came from socialism or capitalism. What mattered was whether it improved people's lives. That simple belief would become the beginning of the greatest economic transformation in modern history. Cliffhanger. China had reached its lowest point. But from the ashes of failure, a new leader was preparing a revolution that would change not only China, but the entire world economy forever. Next part. The man who changed China forever, Deng Xiaoping's economic revolution.